Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Donovan, welcome. Appreciate you spending some time in my office, and as I indicated in the office, I want to talk during the testimony here about Social Security and Medicare. And let's first start with Medicare. I'm assuming you had a chance to kind of bone up on the issues.
I did, and I appreciated our conversation and your PowerPoint, which I have spent some real time looking through and thinking about.
Not everybody does. So having studied this, are you aware of the fact in the President's 2015 budget that Medicare will run a deficit? In other words, it'll pay out more in benefits than takes in during the payroll tax to the tune of about $4.3 trillion. Does that sound about right to you?
I don't have those numbers in front of me.
It's about $3 trillion in revenue, about $7.3 trillion in benefits, so it's about $4.2 trillion. Over 30 years, are you aware that, according to CBO, their alternate fiscal scenario, Medicare will pay out $35 trillion more in benefits than takes in the payroll tax? Is that?
Again, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but as I was just referring to.
So let's stipulate those are correct numbers, and they are. Do you believe that's a program, Medicare, that requires more than modest reforms?
I'm not sure what your definition of modest would be. I just talked about the fact that it requires reforms.
That's what President Obama has repeatedly said. Medicare just requires modest reforms. Don't you think that program requires far more than just modest reforms?
Senator, as I just mentioned, with changes in medical costs, we can have huge impacts, $900 billion in savings that CBO estimates.
$35 trillion. So just kind of look at the alternate fiscal scenario, and we'll take a look at that. If you put up on the screen, I've got a couple quotes from Office of Management Budget Report, the 2010 Analytical Perspective, page 345. I just want to read through this and get your reaction. The balance, they're talking about the Social Security Trust Fund that right now has $2.77 trillion of U.S. government bonds. And OMB's own report says these balances are available for future benefit payments and other trust fund expenditures, but only in a bookkeeping sense. The holdings of the trust fund are not assets of the government as a whole that can be drawn down in the future to fund benefits. Instead, they are claims on the Treasury. Next. The existence of large trust fund balances, therefore, does not by itself increase the government's ability to pay benefits. Put differently, these trust fund balances are assets of the program agencies and corresponding liabilities of the Treasury. And here's the punchline, netting to zero. Do you agree with what OMB in its 2010 publication stated about the trust fund, that you have an asset in the trust fund offset by liability, netting to zero for the federal government?
So, Senator, first of all, I think it's just very important that seniors understand that those obligations are full faith and credit.
Answer, do you agree with this statement in OMB's own publication that the trust fund is an asset offset by liability, netting to zero value to the federal government? By the way, CBO Director Elmendorf did.
Senator, if I could finish, I was just saying, as I said, we spent time talking about this. I looked through the materials that you got to me. I thought they were very helpful.
Okay. I have limited time here, so.
I understand. It's important for seniors to understand those are full faith and credit obligations of the U.S. government, that they are real obligations. If I could just.
No, because
even if those are, they are offsetting, I believe, based on the work, look what I've done since we met, that the trust fund is a useful tool for the American people and seniors to understand transparently the long-term costs.
Again, I'm running out of time.
Social Security.
The trust fund is a useful tool for showing how much the federal government has spent of seniors' money, about $2.77 trillion. It's gone. It has no value to the federal government. So how are we going to fund Social Security, because it's going to run, again, do you understand these numbers? In the next decade, it'll be about a $1.5 trillion deficit. The decade after that, about $4.7 trillion, according to CBO. So about $6 trillion of deficits. How is a trust fund that has no value to the federal government going to fund Social Security over the next 20 years? How does that work? And again, not from a bookkeeping convention, but how do you actually fund Social Security for the next 20 years?
The actuaries recently published, they believe that the trust fund is solvent through 2033. And I agree, as I said earlier, and the President has put forward principles for Social Security reform, we need to move forward in the long run to
Where do,
make
where,
sure
where
that
do we get
those
the, where
reforms-
do we get the money to redeem the bonds when the Social Security Trust Fund comes to Treasury and say, okay, redeem these bonds to fund benefits? Where does the money come from?
The money comes from contributions that
No.
people are
because-
paying in.
No, the only reason they redeem the bonds is because the payroll tax is not covering the benefits. So they redeem the bonds at the Treasury. Where does the Treasury get the money to redeem the bonds?
Senator,
It's a
there-
pretty simple question.
there
Where does
if
the
you
Treasury
look-
get the money to redeem the bonds when payroll taxes don't cover the benefits, which is happening today?
So
Where does the Treasury get the money to pay that in the
if
interest
you
rate?
look at the way the trust fund's constructed, there are payments coming in.
No,
which-
again, answer the
there is-
question.
there is-
Where does
there
the
is
Tre-
interest-
where
there
does
is
the
interest within the trust-
Answer the question. Where does the Treasury get
Senator-
the money to redeem the bonds from the trust fund? Where does the Treasury get the money? Very simple question, particularly if you're going to be director of OMB. Where does the Treasury get the money to redeem its liability on those bonds?
In order to make the pay, you're asking,
Correct,
how
correct.
do
And
we, how do we make payments to
No,
beneficiaries
I'm
of
asking
Social
how the
Security?
Treasury makes good on the U.S. government bonds that the trust fund presents to it when payroll taxes don't cover the benefits, which is going to happen to the tune of about $6 trillion over the next 20 years. Where does the Treasury Department get the money to redeem the bonds?
So,
Do you really not know?
there are sources for Social Security, which include the payments that are made into the system each year, the interest that's available, and any deficits beyond that would have to be financed. Those are the only.
Okay, that's
those are
all
the
I'm,
three pieces.
so what does the Treasury do? They float additional government bonds, or they have to increase taxes, correct?
Senator Johnson, we're way over
Okay.
time. so-
Well, it's only 2 minutes, but whatever. Thank you, ma'am.